Hi, friends, and a very pleasant good day. Welcome to 15241 Today Talk. Before we meet our special guest, I want to take a moment here to tip our caps to Glenn Ward, our producer director, who does such a fabulous job of setting up our equipment and making sure that we get on the air. And we're deeply indebted to him for the extra work that he does as he moves the equipment from the main building of the township over to the McLaughlin Run recreation facility. So, Glenn, thank you very much for doing that for us. Amy Pfender joining us today, and there are a number of reasons we wanted to have Amy on the show. She is an assistant to the superintendent.
That's correct.
And is one of two finalists for the Women in School Leadership Award, and the award pays tribute to the talent, creativity, and vision of outstanding women in the educational administration field. Congratulations to you for that.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me here today.
What are your thoughts about Dr. Razzo nominated you for the award? What are your thoughts about it?
I'm always very humbled when I'm nominated in areas such as leadership recognition, and I think it's hard to, at least for me, ever imagine myself in a national arena in terms of earning recognition like this. So it's just humbling, and I really appreciate the fact that my colleagues support and recognize my skills.
When will you find out?
I actually already have.
Oh, you have?
Yes, and I was not the winner, but I'm still very proud of the fact that I was a finalist in this national arena.
We found out about the award by way of the Upper St. Clair magazine, and well, nevertheless, congratulations to you. Jim, your thoughts?
Well, I think it's wonderful that you bring national recognition to the district and to yourself. So there's a lot of people out there that are in the fields that you're in, but there's not that many being nominated for a top award. So it's great. John Razzo, he and I have the same JTR initials, so we bond well together. So I'll commend him for nominating you.
Well, thank you for doing that.
When did you know in your life that you wanted to be an educator?
Probably as early as third grade. I had a teacher who had recognized my brother and I are not the same individuals. And so he was kind of in a different track than I was initially, and she recognized that he needed to be pushed a little bit harder. And so from my third grade teacher recognizing my brother, and I had thought that I wanted to be a teacher, but then by probably sixth grade, I knew for sure that I wanted to go into education. I did not necessarily identify special education, though, as my track that I was going to go into until I was getting ready to go to college.
You're from the Fort Cherry School District.
That's correct.
Identify this third grade teacher.
I'd love to. Emma Johnston, and I just unfortunately read that her husband, who was also my high school principal, just passed away. So this is timely recognition for both of them.
And then how did you decide that it was going to be special ed?
Well, at that point in time, K through 6 educators were like a dime a dozen. So I knew I had to kind of find something that would make me seem a little bit more marketable. But I also really enjoyed just kind of thinking about the unique skills of students. And I started to look at working at a school, the Allegheny Valley School. I worked as a summer program aide for several years. And coupled with making the decision for special ed and then doing that during the summers while I was in college, I knew I was in the right area and making good choices to help support unique learners.
Bachelor degree from Edinburgh, master's from Pitt, superintendent letter of certification from Cal. How'd you decide on Edinburgh?
Edinburgh at that point in time was one of the strongest schools in the state area of education to grow educators, and they had, at that point in time, they also had a campus school. So you were able to get a lot of your hours in for internship and observation. And it was just a unique area. Now, let me tell you, I did not like the weather at Edinburgh very much. You could always tell the freshmen with the snow coming down in November because it was always an eye-opener. But it was a great experience being an Edinburgh student. And I came out feeling very prepared to do what I needed to do as an educator.
Do you think that there's a bottom line theory about what makes a great educator?
Well, first and foremost, you have to love children. And I think that you have to really realize that education is not just a job and you get your summers off. You have to be truly dedicated to what you are doing. So I think it's that love of children and dedication, because you don't close up your bags in June and walk away from it. It really is a 12-month job, and you spend most of your summer still getting ready for that next year and recovering from what you've done the previous school year, because I've said this time and time again, and I think this year has shown this, that I feel that education is one of the most noble professions that an individual can choose.
I suspect, Jim, you would agree with that?
Yes, very much so. I mean, there's a lot of rewards. You don't go into education, I don't think, for the money. You go in for other reasons. And
you said reward. In what way?
well, just this, if you help a young person or you watch a young person grow and succeed and mature, I mean, if you've had a part of that, that's very satisfying. Would you agree to that?
Oh, I absolutely would. And in terms of satisfaction, the current senior class at Upper St. Clair was my first fifth grade class of being principal at Boyce. So this senior class is really special to me, and I see names and the honors that they're all receiving. And I'm like, oh, I remember when you came into Boyce and you were just waist high at that point, and now look, you're getting ready to graduate from one of our top districts in the area and making that next leap into their life. So that internal satisfaction, seeing where students start and where they end, is just amazing.
Let me make sure I heard you right. So your first class that you had at Boyce is now graduating
As
2021.
principal. Yep. Yes.
How long were you the principal at Boyce?
13-14 school year was my first year, and then, so 2.5 years, because then in January of 2016, I stepped into the Director of Student Support Services role in the district and oversaw the programs that fall into that student support services realm, such as special education, nursing, ESL, counseling, school psychologist. It's the catch-all.
Do you miss the daily student interaction that you had at Boyce?
I do. I do.
You and Jim were both talking about the mentoring of students. I'm thinking about the fact that it isn't one style fits all when you're dealing with so many different young people with different personalities and backgrounds.
Oh, no, it's definitely, each day is a unique day, and you have to really stop, think, and be creative in terms of how you're addressing each situation. And it's all about relationships, too. I feel that relationships with students and parents really help support the situations that you work through on a daily basis as a teacher, as an administrator. But each one comes with its own unique caveats that you learn to address and talk through in the best way possible.
And get them to trust and respect you.
Yes.
Now that you're up there in that new tower, where do you spend your most time, in what venue?
So I primarily oversee high school, grades 9 through 12 in my current position, and I'm still very much connected to the student support services component in the district. Most of my time is spent working with high school administration, and this year has come with its own unique challenges in terms of just getting out into buildings and being a part of the daily opportunities that our district has done an amazing job providing this school year, despite the challenges that have been in front of us. But high school has been my area for the last 2 years.
You like the high school? I mean,
I do like the high school, but I started down the road in another district in grades 7 through 8. So I am a little bit of a middle educator at heart in terms of just the kids and the sarcasm that they start to bring to the table at that grade level. But I do like working with high school admin and the high school staff and students.
Do you find that that educational philosophies are always evolving and changing?
Yes.
In what ways?
I think that it's always about the best practices change based on where kids are at. So when I think back to when I started into education, not all kids had iPhones, not all kids were learning through technology. It was still a very traditional approach. So, the philosophies around one-to-one devices and how to best use those as an instructional tool have definitely changed. And this past year has been kind of a warp speed for many districts. We were already ahead of the game in many ways to support where we needed to be to get ready for this current school year. But I think that there's always things that are happening for students from a developmental standpoint and what society is bringing to the table, and districts and the educational systems need to be ready to respond to those. And so I think that that's really what drives some of the changes. And then sometimes you also see past practices kind of circle back into those current new practices as well too.
Is there always a commitment to math, history, English, sciences, and then I've understood that there's been some debate as to where do the other classes fit in as it relates to music and arts and et cetera?
So there's obviously guidelines from the state education association of what's required of school districts. So obviously your math, English, science, and social studies there's kind of set expectations around those areas. And then kind of the elective areas, which are the music, the arts, and now STEAM initiatives. I think it's really difficult for students to find balance on how to fit it all in, especially when you're a district that has so many offerings for students, because we have students who have in the past scheduled themselves so full that they don't have a lunch during the day. I would probably starve. But there's so many offerings, but there's required offerings as well too. So there's the standards, and then thinking about what students want. So our curriculum process in the district does a really nice job of recognizing what students might be communicating that they want, and we work to develop courses that are in response to that, while also keeping courses that are ones that are just the tried and true ones that students are still taking. And so we really look at what students are saying to us as well too.
As a guy who spent a lot of time in the health and physical education area, you mentioned something about these kids schedule themselves with no time for lunch. What is the administrative viewpoint on that? Because from my standpoint, I don't think we should let them schedule themselves without a time to eat and nourish and exercise. So you ever have any administrative arguments about that?
Well, I think that this is another one of those cases where you start to look at the students individually. I think philosophically for me, it's important for students to have some sort of downtime in their schedule, because we all need downtime. And so for students who are so scheduled during the school day, they're probably very scheduled after school as well too, based off of all the opportunities that are available to them. So, administratively, I think it probably, one, depends on the administrator, but two, it's also about the students. Some students can handle it. Some students can just eat, crackers as they're walking down the hall, and they feel like not taking a lunch works for them. Other students, we sometimes have to be more intentional in those discussions about how it might be better for you to have a little bit of downtime, or to use that time to, just catch your breath a little bit. It's not all about eating too. It's about kind of organizing your thoughts halfway through the day and taking some time. So those are things that we've looked at and continue to talk about at the high school level for sure. Obviously, K through 8 lunch is a scheduled part of the day, and it's something that we just have individual discussions with students and parents about in terms of what's best for that individual student.
I'm going to ask you a question that I get asked or used to get asked. Have kids changed or parents changed? What's your feeling about interactions?
I think it's a little bit of everything, to be honest. I mean, I think about when I was in school and just the expectations around curriculum and what students are required to do has changed. I think about when I started into education and what I was teaching in 8th grade is now what kids are learning in like 5th and 6th grade. So, there is a shift in terms of student expectations. I think that parents have changed in response to, things that are more available to kids, talking about social media and the instant access that kids have. And so I think it's just a big circle, but I don't know where the circle started to say what the shift was. And I even think about that for myself personally. What I thought was going to be really important as my kids started to get older, I've had to shift in my thinking. And, we have constant conversations in my house now that I have a teenager headed to 9th grade next year about what's important and what our priorities need to be. And so as a parent, I had my own thoughts, but now I also know that I need to respond to my child in a way that's supportive, but yet sets a guideline that we get to an end game together. So I think it's just this circle, and where it started, I don't know, but I think that it's just evolution.
My high school coach used to say, when I became a coach, he always said, kids will do what you expect them to do. And I still think that's true. I think they secretly or whatever, they still want structure, and they will do what the expectations are. So I don't know. Sometimes I think kids haven't changed that much, and I realize the cell phones and some of that stuff changed the world, but I guess I'll always be an old-fashioned educator.
No, I think that in many ways, the developmental milestones still happen when they're supposed to happen, and structure and routine are still very much important aspects. But I think what goes into that structure and routine for some kids varies more than it has in the past.
Yeah.
The Upper St. Clair is such a great community.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a great school district. Your thoughts about what makes it so good?
Probably every aspect of it, because it takes a community to create such a positive atmosphere and the recognition that the community receives. So, our parents are so involved and supportive. We have amazing students. I mean, they've shown their ability to be resilient and to respond to challenging and ever-changing situations. We have, in terms of our district, the staff is just incredible. So it's just a well-rounded arena that I think really grows and supports this community on an ongoing basis.
How beneficial is it for you to be in a really significant position here at Upper St. Clair, and how does that benefit you as a mother in another school district?
Well, so my children would probably argue that it's great to have a mom who's been in education, but maybe not so great because I know some more of the behind the scenes things that might be going on with adolescents. And so they'll be like, all right, so what are you trying to say to me? But for me, I think it helps have perspective. I'm very grateful for the opportunities that my children have, even though we live in a much smaller district. But it also helps me, I think, balance what, some of my own decisions or what goes into supporting our district here because I have one side and I have another. And I've often joked that sometimes I, almost live a little bit of a double life. I live in a very small district, grew up in that small district. My dad grew up in that district. So I have that as a very solid perspective while also coming here and working collaboratively with a much bigger administrative team and staff. And so, I have 2 small buildings in my home district, but here we have 6. So I think it just helps with perspective and decision making.
I guess I'm wondering, I don't guess I'm wondering, I know I'm wondering, is your community where you live, is there any way for them to tap into your experience, your knowledge that makes them better?
So I played a role in their reopening teams this year. So, when all districts were talking about how to reopen this school year, I played a role on Fort Cherry's. And so, I was talking about it during the day here and going home and talking about it in the evening at night at Fort Cherry. So I was able to provide my perspectives there and just my constant gauge on the changing mandates and supporting our own community that way too, because unless you're paying attention to it, it was so evolving that it was also about educating parents. And so things that, some of the parents felt that were a priority, just by sharing my knowledge and my experiences, I was able to give that back. And I've also worked a little bit with their strategic planning committees as well in Fort Cherry. And I also work with the superintendent and various other professional organizations as well.
When I was reading the definition of this award, one of the words that jumped out at me was creativity. How does one guarantee that they can use their creativity, and in what ways are we talking about when we're talking about creativity in education?
So I think the first thing that's important when it comes to creativity in education and in administration is knowing that that's a supported characteristic. So you need to feel empowered and to be able to bring your ideas to the table. So creativity in education can be as simple as rethinking schedules or, stepping into courses or really being able to think about the bigger picture as a whole. So it's, creativity for our students, we know can come in different forms, different class selections, but being a creative leader, which is part of that description, is really about also knowing that you're empowered to do that. Because if you're not empowered to be creative, and that doesn't mean every creative idea is accepted, but you work as a team then. And it's really critical to know that that aspect is supported, because change doesn't happen without creativity.
Well, Jim, when you were teaching and coaching, did that creativity part come into your life in terms of how can we do it better?
Well, I think coaches and educators, I think we're always evaluating how we can do things better. I know some of my coaches didn't like my lengthy coaching meetings, but that was the gist of what I was trying to do. Can we do it better or another way? Or I used to love to have personnel meetings. And I'm sure you guys at administrative office have personnel meetings and discussions all the time. So, yeah, that's an ongoing deal.
President Kennedy once said that he felt the effectiveness of meetings was inversely proportional to the size of the meeting, that is, the number of people that were in it. Would you agree with that?
Probably depends on the purpose of the meeting. So as there's obviously multiple meetings that we have as a district, so whether it's just a CO meeting or it's our administrative team meetings. This year, all of our faculty meetings have been held virtually, so I think that the size of the meeting depends on the purpose of the meeting. I think we've also really started to evaluate how to have effective meetings, and sometimes those meetings are just better held through an email at this point as well, too. So I think there's a lot of, agreement with that statement, but it also depends on the purpose of the meeting.
Okay. Let me shift gears a little bit here. Tell everybody that is watching this interview with Amy Pfender that Amy lives in Robinson Township in Washington County. There are two Robinson Townships that are somewhat geographically close, probably the one in Allegheny County that most people know about, but there is one over in Washington County. Your husband, Keith, what does he do for a living?
He is in the computer field and works for BNY Mellon, and so he's been working from home since March of last year, and that's been a blessing, I think, in terms of us managing that, the schedules and things that have come up with this year. But he originally thought that he was going to go into criminal justice, and as life has unfolded, he has ended up in doing some software and cloud management, and has been very successful in that area.
And how does his knowledge and expertise help you in education?
That's a tough one because I feel like we both work in such different arenas at times that it's hard to understand each other's world. So things that seem like really big to him, I have a hard time understanding, and things that are really big to me, he has a hard time understanding. But at the same time, I think sometimes just talking out loud and having him go, so what are you saying, helps me ground myself a little bit more.
Did I hear you have a young football player in your household?
I do have a young football player in my household. So my husband played football, and Jonah will be, like I said, in 9th grade next year, but he did not start to play until 7th grade.
That's all right.
He was a little stout, so he couldn't make the weight limits for the younger football leagues. So, but he's very dedicated to what he's doing, and I'm certainly very proud of the initiative he's taken to better himself and to get out there on the field.
Well, good. Then you have another child.
Emily.
Emily.
You have Joan as your son, and then Emily, your daughter.
So she will be going into 7th grade this coming school year, and just this past winter decided that she wanted to try basketball. So she's been doing basketball, but she's been the musician in the family, and in kindergarten announced she wanted to learn how to play the violin. And so we've been doing violin and flute lessons. Fort Cherry, being a smaller district, does not have an orchestra program, so that has been something that we have supported on our own because it's been something that she expressed interest in, and so we do those lessons privately, but now we're also doing the basketball arena. And Jonah also plays basketball as well, too, so, and he's been doing that since 3rd grade, so.
Would you believe that I took violin lessons when I was 5 years old?
No, I would not. I
don't know why I brought it up.
I would have thought you would have been a drummer. I would have not. I would have not seen you.
No.
Toting a violin to school.
I should have stuck with it.
Did you play an instrument when you were young?
I did. I played the clarinet and the piano.
Well, there's so much to be learned from so many aspects in our lives, including playing an instrument, playing on a sports team, et cetera. Any final thoughts as we get ready to wrap up the interview?
No, I just have appreciated being here today and talking with you, and I hope that individuals thinking about going into education might have a couple takeaways here today as well.
So you're a big proponent of people move. You said earlier, by the way, that there was a time where there were a lot of people going into education. Is that falling off dramatically?
Yes, I can't remember what the statistics are, but there are way less people graduating in the field of education, especially in the state of Pennsylvania. And there's been changes in certifications, so that's the way the state has aligned things. And I just think that, maybe there for a while it was hard to get a job in education, so people were not choosing to go into that field. And there's also such a high demand in information technology as well too now. So talk about shifts in terms of expectations in our culture and where the job demands lie. So education has not been something that people have been choosing as much.
Amy Pfender, thank you very much for joining us. You're an extremely talented and caring person, and it's been a pleasure to have us on our program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amy Pfender joining us. She is assistant to the superintendent in the Upper St. Clair School Thank you once again for joining us on 15241 Today Talk.